attending. So probably should see most of your hands. We're not the First Church. For how many of you, New Hope is the first church you've attended using screens, lights, and an awesome music team? Maybe a few of you. For how many of you, you wonder if New Hope is really a church? So last week we started this Practicing Warm series, and we're working through a book together. And again, for those that are guests today, we're welcoming you. So even if you don't read this book or pick it up, hopefully the message will have some things to say to you. But again, if you're interested, it's the book called Accidental Pharisees. And so we're in chapters 4, 5, and 6 this week. Next week we'll be in chapters 7, 8, and 9. We've got these real brief chapters followed by some really good small group discussion questions. Next week, just to let you know, the chapters, they're going to talk about something, and the person that writes this book is actually a pastor out in San Diego. San Diego, yes, that place that never gets real cold. But he's going to give a shout out to the Packers next week. So we're going to start our message time next week just thinking about the Packers and just what it could be. So anyway, that's next week. So today, we're looking to be practicing warm mercy. The word mercy, and oftentimes it may not be something that we use in our everyday language and speech and talk, but I think when you think about the word mercy, as we're going to do today, it's meant to be a warm word. The word mercy is meant to be a warm word. In fact, mercy is oftentimes what we would call a mark of God's church, the kind of this capital C church. That wherever God's church is really doing well, the stories that you're going to hear will have kind of a warm mercy to them. Now, we also know that sometimes the lack of the mark of the church, the good history of God's church, there's going to be stories of mercy. But as soon as I say that there are good stories of God's church, it usually kind of says that there's probably some bad stories too. And whenever there's bad stories of what we call God's church, usually it's a lack of mercy. People come in and they've wanted to get kind of warmed by the mercy of God. And they came into a church and they met condemnation, they met coldness, they met hardness. But again, when we think about, what kind of gives us hope for God's church, what maybe has drawn a lot of you into this church today. Maybe, you haven't been coming to church, a church is something that you haven't really participated a lot in life. Maybe you grew up in a church that was kind of a cold church. It was not what you call a warm, merciful church. But the good stories of God's church when it's doing right, there's stories of mercy there. Again, some of the things that I'm just fascinated about God's church is, and a lot of scholars have studied this over the years, how is it that God's church got to grow so fast in those early few centuries? It went from just this little small place over, we know about it, Jerusalem, Israel, and all that kind of stuff, we know about it. But back in that day, it was just this little small place, and Jesus never traveled all that far. But yet, the mercy of God's church just started to expand because all those early followers of Jesus that believed that Jesus died for my sins and rose from the dead, as we were talking about a few weeks ago, Jesus died for my sin and rose from the dead, they started doing works of mercy. Warm works of mercy. And sometimes in the cultures that they lived in, again, not a Christian culture, they weren't ruled by their own nation. It wasn't a Christian government or anything. But when something would happen and there would be some sort of a plague, some sort of a sickness that would come, oftentimes the people that were even members of a person's family, they had a religious system, but it wasn't a Christian religious system. Many times those people, they just left. Oh, it must be your fate to get this disease and you might die. Christians moved into that place. They'd go in and take care of dying people, sometimes dying themselves. They had this warm mercy about them. When some people wouldn't want children, they just wanted to discard. They didn't want to have one more mouth to feed. They could hardly feed the mouths that they already had. The Christians started adopting these children. I mean, the history of the church, or God's church, where it's going good when it's warm with mercy, that's where hospitals started to come from. Orphanages started being planted by all kinds of churches as warm acts of mercy. Lots of times, the reason that we have the education system that we have today, you trace it back, it all started from the church wanting to do warm acts of mercy so that people would know more about this world, maybe come to know this Jesus as the warm, merciful Savior. So in this series that we're in, this practicing warm today, this idea of practicing warm mercy, people following Jesus, if they're following Jesus as he is inviting them to follow him, they enter into a flow of warm mercy. The reason we get attracted to Jesus is because somehow he is warm and merciful. And then we start following him and we keep receiving that warm mercy. We keep receiving that warm mercy. I mean, that's the story of my life. I just keep receiving this warm mercy, receiving this warm mercy. I want to keep following him. But not only do I want to just be receiving this warm mercy, I want to start being someone like Jesus. I'm never going to be like him, but I want to be someone like him to be warm back. I don't want to just receive mercy and think somehow, hey, I'm a good guy. I should receive God's mercy. Jesus' mercy. I'm a pastor. No, I never wanted that. I want to receive this warm mercy so I can give this warm mercy back so maybe someone else will be attracted to following Jesus. So we're going to keep practicing following Jesus. Keep practicing this idea of warm mercy. How do we receive it? How do we extend it? So that others, there would just be mercy around people that are following. There would be mercy around God's church. It would be known as a warm, merciful place. Over the centuries in God's church, there are mercy words that oftentimes the church has used to be practicing this idea of warm mercy. There's a sense that they wanted to use these words so they would not forget. They would not forget that the reason that they're in a church wasn't because of how good they were, but because of warm mercy was extended to them. They came in, and then just warm mercy kept flowing all around that church. So they used words over the years of practicing warm mercy. Some of those words might be familiar to you. Again, whether you've grown up in church or you didn't grow up in church. Maybe you grew up in church and been away from church for a while. And maybe the reason that you've been away from the church is that you didn't experience a lot of more mercy. I mean, there are people that kind of condemned you. There are people that judged you. Just kind of felt that, Sometimes they didn't even have to say it. They just kind of looked at you. The way you were dressed. Whether you were female, whether you were male, whether you were overweight, whether you were underweight, whether you were kind of from a richer side of town or maybe the poorer side of town, you just kind of sometimes felt judged. And so there's reasons, sometimes there's really maybe valid reasons that you kind of just thought, well, I'm not going to hang around the church. It's cold. Sometimes your experience may have been, my experience may have been that we've gone into a church and maybe it was a church of only 50 people. And so they knew we were a guest there. No one looked at us. No one wanted to make eye contact with us. No one smiled. Walked in and we were just quiet and kind of just looked around. And so sometimes we even describe the church as being cold. I don't think the church of Jesus, the church where people are following Jesus, should be a cold place. I don't think it should be a real hot, condemning, judging kind of place either. I think it's supposed to be a warm place. And so the church, over the years, have used words to try to be practicing warm mercy. Again, if you grew up in church, maybe you will recognize these phrases. The church that I grew up in, oftentimes, when I got there, kind of in my junior high years, didn't go to church when I was real small, junior high years, confirmation years, Lutheran world and that, we used this hymnal, and always in the hymnal, as we opened up and started the part of the liturgy, after we oftentimes sing the hymn, we would oftentimes sing, kind of chant, three phrases that repeat: Lord, have mercy on us. Christ, have mercy on us. Lord, have mercy on us. Those words would be practicing words. Lord, have mercy on us. Christ, have mercy on us. Lord, have mercy on us. Sometimes we got to see the that practice of those words. Sometimes, even after saying those words, as they're walking out the door, there wasn't a lot of mercy extended to other people. Sometimes, you'd go into a meeting where there were adults, and they had just got done worshiping, using those words, Lord have mercy on us, Christ have mercy on us, Lord have mercy on us. And there wasn't any mercy in that room at all. Not for the pastor. Not from the pastor for the people, not from the people for the pastor. And again, it just kind of, man, something's not. So the church is supposed to be practicing these words. And I want us to be a church that just don't say them, but practice warm with them. That's why they're designed. That's why God gives them to us. That's how the church starts. God brings His mercy to us, and somehow we're drawn to that warmth. If you start experiencing that warmth on a regular basis, as a habit, as a pattern, as practice, or you just want more of it. I know I do. Again, we choose to live here where we know it's going to get really, really cold out there. And so what do you do over and over when it's really cold outside? You keep practicing warm. You keep practicing warm. You try to get from one warm spot to the next warm spot. You try to get your car heated up so it can be warm. You want your homes to be warm. You want your beds to be warm. You want your showers to be warm. You want your clothing to be warm. You want hats on. You want mittens on. You want big boots on. You want to stay warm. We're going to practice. We do all these things to practice. Can we practice warm in God's church? Lord, have mercy on us. Christ, have mercy on us. Lord, have mercy. If that could be a prayer, that could be a repeating prayer for us. In fact, why don't we just do a little bit of a practice with saying those words together this morning. Lord, have mercy on us. Christ, have mercy on us. Lord, have mercy on us. There's another practice that the church and the followers of Jesus, these warm, merciful followers of Jesus have used over and over again. It's known as a breath prayer because it just takes a breath to pray. And the prayer goes like this. Lord Jesus, have mercy on me, a sinner. Lord Jesus, have mercy on me, a sinner. Let's practice that prayer together. Lord Jesus, have mercy on me, a sinner. A couple of years ago, I was watching 60 Minutes on one Sunday night, and they took their crew to a monastery over in Italy that's, I think, like maybe 1,500 years old. And the only way to get to this monastery is by boat. You come in to this little place where you can land. Then you got to climb all the way up, and there's these amazing set of buildings up there. And again, just add this amazing history. This amazing. So there's these monks, and there's monks from America. There's monks from Italy. There's monks from Africa. There's monks from China. There's monks from all over the world that come there. They get drawn to there. So again, they somehow got access. I think that if I remember the story right, they had tried for years and years to be able to get there. They kind of shared a very quick, fascinating story about Nazi Germany wanted to kind of get a hold of the art treasures that were there, and somehow they were able to hold that off during that period of time. But one of the things that just really fascinated me is that most of the monks there practiced this breath prayer, Lord Jesus, have mercy on me, a sinner. So one of the scenes in this 60 Minutes episode was kind of from a distance showing a couple of monks working on some fruit trees, doing some, pruning on these fruit trees, raising their own food, doing all this kind of stuff. But as they showed from a distance, you could see the person's lips move. Jesus, have mercy on me, a sinner. Jesus, have mercy on me, a sinner. We're practicing. Again, I don't think you have to become a monk or a nun to practice that. Although every once in a while, the monk life sounds really good. But I can get over that real quickly. But I love that breath prayer, Lord Jesus, have mercy on me, a sinner. Again, I think the more that we practice that, the more that we'll be a warm, merciful kind of people that are following Jesus. Maybe we'll be people that will keep warmly attracting and drawing others, because we really don't live in a warm, friendly world. I mean, we try our hardest to make it warm. I talked about, we can dress warm, we can kind of feed ourselves warm, we can shower ourselves warm, we can medicine ourselves warm, we can be in our car warm, we can be in a building warm, we can be in a bed warm, we fight for warm, we fight for warm, we fight for warm. But we also know that as hard as we fight for warm, can't really hold on to it. Things will come, sometimes from this world. Sometimes some of those things come from me. So we want to practice more. How do we receive the mercy of Jesus? So again, we're going to look at kind of a famous parable of Jesus. If you've been in church, if you haven't been in church, you know this is oftentimes a parable that we just kind of know. You don't have to know a lot about church. You don't have to spend a lot of time in church. You got to get it right away. I mean, that's what the wonder, the mastery of Jesus and his parables. We just kind of get it right away. It wasn't something that just is 2,000 years ago. Man, we're going to see it just living out today. Just as much. Before I get into that, again, for our New Hope members, real quick, just our yes all in. There's an insert again in your bulletin. First hour meeting, it may not even take a whole hour, is going to be this afternoon. There's childcare. But if you want to come this afternoon, make sure that you sign up so we can make sure we got enough people to keep your children safe and taken care of during that hour. As you know, no Packer game today, so again, just an hour, and it's going to be awesome. What we're going to do in this yes all in, just going to be practicing warm. We're going to be practicing warm giving. And for some of you, that's like, well, that's an oxymoron. How do you know the church? Here at this church, I know I'm practicing warm giving. I know there's quite a few of you, and we're always inviting others to join us in that. So, again, that's just a real... In this parable that Jesus tells in Luke chapter 18, I got this question to ask us. Where's the warm in this parable? Because you got to start off with two characters, and neither one of these characters are what you'd call kind of warm characters. Even though the one kind of not so warm character in the end kind of receives some warmth, the question is going to be, should that person receive warmth? So here's the parable. Jesus also told this parable to some who trusted in themselves that they were righteous and treated others with contempt. Again, not really a warm start there. Thought themselves right and treated others with contempt. But we know what Jesus is going to get at here. So he says, 2 men went up into the temple to pray. The temple, by God's design, is to be a place where people will experience mercy. Back then, even today. Wherever God's church gathers in his name, there's supposed to be warmth there. When they both go into the temple to pray, hopefully to receive some kind of warmth. We're going to see the first guy he just kind of generates some self-warmth. The other guy is going to kind of plead for the warmth. And then he identifies that one is a Pharisee and the other a tax collector. In the Pharisees just always, just like, that person is not a warm, friendly person. That person does more damage to souls over and over. Pharisees. And they're still alive today. You've known them. Maybe sometimes you've even been one. Again, this book that we're reading, accidental. Sometimes we're all fair. I can be a Pharisee. Am I accidentally a Pharisee? And if I am, can I realize it and return back to warmth? And then the other thing, the tax collector, again, we don't like tax collectors even in our days, but it's so hard for us to understand that the tax collector back in the day of Jesus was just someone that was just hated. I think maybe, maybe we can think about it in this way. A tax collector could be a person that, in our day, preys on young women. He takes them and makes them do unspeakable things. Maybe that would help us think about how tax collector was viewed in the days of Jesus. It wasn't all that much different. Again, the tax collector usually was a fellow Jewish person, a fellow American. What was so different back then, he was working for this oppressive government known as Rome, and they had all kinds of just skanky things that they were always doing. So today, under the American freedoms, there's a person that can do something so unspeakable. But it's not too far from us, and so we have that person identified. Man, we wouldn't be thinking warm thoughts about that person. So Jesus says, here's this Pharisee, here's this tax collector. They come in. So it says, the Pharisee, standing by himself, prayed thus, God, I thank you that I'm not like other men, extortioners, unjust, adulterers, even like this tax collector. I fast twice a week. I give tithes of all that I get. I put under here so I wouldn't forget. I have a boiling anger for this religious display of arrogance. You're just standing up going, God, you're so lucky to have me on your team. I am so glad I'm following you. And I do it well. And those are the kind of people oftentimes that have driven people from the warm presence of God's church. But you know, Jesus continues on with this parable, and again, I think it was a real shocking, disturbing parable back then. And this time, as I'm reading Acts of the Pharisees and I'm going over this parable, it became a lot more disturbing to me. I'm hoping maybe I can disturb you with that too. Ready for that? So it says the tax collector, kind of would almost expect this from Jesus, you know, the tax collector, because we don't put all the kind of onus things on him. The tax collector, standing far off, would not even lift up his eyes to heaven, but beat his breast, saying, God, be merciful to me, a sinner. He knew he was a cold sinner. He knew he was a hard sinner. He knew that people hated him. He knew that people detested him. He knew that oftentimes when people, after he walked by, they would turn and spit. He knew. Somehow he still wanted more mercy. And then Jesus says, I tell you, this man went down to his house justified rather than the other. He received some mercy. And I put in the parentheses under our notes, I attest that a tax collector looks like a good guy in this parable. And I think that's what the first audience would have just like, God, no. So these questions. How vast is God's grace? How vast is God's grace? And we always want it to be vast for us. But how vast is God's grace for real sinners? How vast? And really, 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 just coming back to us, how vast is God's grace for me? For each of us here today. It might be more vast than you think. And in this question, how disturbing is God's vast grace? How disturbing is God's vast grace? To think that maybe someday a person that was involved with sex and slavery could receive the warm mercy of God. That's tough. It's a tough one for me. I don't know what's going to happen. I'm not God. But what if His grace is that vast? And what if His grace needs to be that vast for me? Again, for most of us here, we're not the tax collectors. We're not the people that are going to do unspeakable things. We're the Pharisees. Maybe not along that whole deal, but oftentimes, we just kind of think we're okay. I'm not as bad as that person. I'm not as good as that person, so I'm just okay. The mercy of God is going to be upon me because I'm okay. But really, we don't need Jesus to figure that one out. God's grace is so vast. It's vast for me. Then the last thing, Jesus' disturbing conclusion to this parable, and he wraps up the parable with these words. For everyone who exalts himself will be humbled, but the one who humbles himself will be exalted. Oftentimes we read those words and we kind of say then, okay, I'm not going to exalt myself so I won't have to be humble. I'm going to humble myself so I can be exalted. That's what you would think, That's what I think. I kind of thought that over the years as a follower of Jesus. And that's what he's saying. He's like, all right, don't exalt yourself so that I'm going to have to humble you. Just humble yourself and then I'll exalt you. So we kind of try to do this backdoor thing. Well, I know, I don't think Jesus is giving us a description here. We can ask these, but does the Pharisee know that he was exalting himself? Did he really know that? Again, is he just honestly following lots of other Pharisees along the way? When he was a child, there was a Pharisee that he was a pillar of the community. People wanted to be, they followed him. And he just followed that Pharisee. And so he's just following a pair that he'd seen so many times before. Does the tax collector know that he really is humbling himself? And one of the disturbing things that kind of came, did some reading some commentaries and all that kind of thing. One of the disturbing things is that, Jesus says nothing in the parable that the tax collector goes home and he stops tax collecting. You don't read anything about that. So does he even know that he was humbling himself? Do we know? Do we know if we're humbling ourselves, exalting ourselves? Do we know that we're being more like a Pharisee, maybe more like a tax? Do we know? Maybe Jesus' conclusion is an observation, not an instruction. You will observe that when people exalt themselves, God will end up humbling them. You will observe that when people humble themselves, God oftentimes will end up exalting them. They won't even know. They won't even know. So maybe it's just an observation more than it is an instruction. So here at New Hope, we want to keep practicing what we sometimes call New Hope Dolphin Warm. We've used dolphins over the years because people will pay money. Many of you here, you've paid money to go and swim with a dolphin, or you've gone to some place where you can touch dolphins. You want to touch dolphins, you want to be with dolphins. Dolphins are just a cool creation of God. They jump out of the water, they do flips, they go to a dolphin show. They're just awesome. And so people oftentimes they like Jesus because he's so dolphin-like. You could be around him, you could touch him, he just got a warmth from him. We want to be more dolphin-like and less shark-like. Again, the Pharisees they're the sharks. So then when they come onto the scene, they're going to chomp something off. They're going to destroy something. They're just going to go after people that aren't as good as they are. And as I've heard a number of pastors say, whenever you see Pharisees in the Bible, you should hear the soundtrack from Jaws. Dun 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 dun. They're about ready to chew something up, and usually it's Jesus, but he never quite get chewed up by them. He takes all their sharkiness and gives back warm. Sometimes here at New Hope, you'll hear someone say, "Ooh, that was a little sharky," because sometimes, as we're trying to practice warm, we come out a little sharky. Oftentimes, I've heard that before. I would do something and people say, "Oh, that was a little sharky," and I'm going, "Oh yeah, you're probably right." Or sometimes, "No, that's a little cold." And, "Oh yeah, you're probably right." Because we always want to return back to warm. We want to be a church that's more dolphin-like and less shark-like. On page 47, again, if you don't read this book, but he asked this question. So who's on your list? So who's on your list? People that you are real warm to. Who's on your list? Now, I know everybody in this room this morning has a list. And I know that because I have a list. Sometimes I look at people and I'm saying, "Oh, they're not really good followers of Jesus. They'd be in church more often. Oh, they're not real good followers of Jesus. They'd serve. Oh, they're not real good followers of Jesus. Blah, blah, blah. They're not real good followers of Jesus. They wouldn't be, just got this continual thing going through my mind. Sometimes people show up in here that you've known from years ago. And when you knew them years ago, it was in a bar scene. And you remember how horrible they were in the bar scene. You remember how promiscuous they were, whether they're male or female. You knew some of the things that they were doing as they were drinking. You knew some of the things that they were doing besides drinking. And then they all of a sudden, they come into church. You haven't seen them for years. And you just kind of remember, those people shouldn't be in church. But oftentimes we forget that, how did I know those people before? And over the years, God extended more mercy to you. What if God is now ready to? What if that person is ready to receive God's more mercy? More than likely, when you started receiving that more mercy in church, there were some visible people in the flesh that extended that more mercy to you. What if you started extending that more mercy to someone else? Someone else you know from a past life. You've moved on from that past life. Maybe they will too. So here's the question I want to end up with today. What if we together begin practicing thoughts of warm Jesus, mercy for one person on our list. One person. Maybe that one person is in the room today. Every time you look at it, you don't have warm mercy kind of thoughts. What if today, when you look at them the next time, a little bit of warm mercy? Just one. Because, I've got dozens on my list. Maybe you do too. Just one. So let's practice together some warm mercy. Lord, have mercy on us. Christ, have mercy on us. Lord, have mercy on us. Let's say those words again. Lord, have mercy on us. Christ, have mercy on us. Lord, have mercy on us. Let's pray the breath prayer. Lord Jesus, have mercy on me. Let's stand, sing one more song, and we'll be on our way. So, Jesus, this morning, you have been extending warm mercy to us for this whole hour that we've been here. Again, the warm water that I get to use for baptisms, and just a warm grace that comes upon little Allison. The warm mercy that's extended through singing, the warm mercy that comes through Little Communion, the warm mercy that comes from our prayers, the warm mercy that comes from your word, the warm mercy that's all around us, the warm mercy that we can extend to each other, the warm mercy that I get to receive from so many of you. So many of you keep asking about our son, and he's doing well, and I keep, every time, though, and when I get to talk to him, I'm saying, hey, all these people keep asking, I know that warms him up, and so Jesus. And we people that receive your warm mercy, then may we somehow be able to release it back. Release it back to people that, most of the time, most of our existence, maybe all the years that when we look at that person, we just kind of have cold thoughts, we have judgmental thoughts. Jesus, help us to practice having warm mercy thoughts about one person. We ask it in your name.